I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
The more you talk, the harder I want to hit you.
I'm happy because of being here today. Fuck you.
Come on, you want me to drive? No. You're supposed to be suicidal, remember? I'll
Anybody
drive.
a drive?
Get in the car.
Fucking shit. Fuck me in the fucking ass. Fuck you, you fucking stupid cunt.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a belated Valentine's Day special review. Yeah, I know technically Valentine's Day is over. It's a little late to be reviewing this, but you know what? I decided, because, well, FANEXPO was Valentine's Day, and you know that I was out filming the FANEXPO video, and of course, I decided, you know, I still need a Valentine's movie to review for a Valentine's Day special, and I decided that I would be reviewing the 2010 romantic comedy film Valentine's Day, which is directed by late director Gary Marshall, who may rest in peace. The guy directed films like Pretty Woman, directed the Princess Diaries films, and well, and when this movie came out, this is a film that it did make decent money, but it got ripped to shreds by critics. And honestly, watching the film, I can honestly see why it did. I'm kind of not surprised it got torn apart and it wasn't really well liked by anybody when it came out. And I'll get to reasons kind of why it was. But the plot of this movie is because it's about more than a dozen Los Angeles citizens who are navigating Valentine's Day from early morning until midnight. Three couples awake together, and each relationship sputters or any worth saving. This grade school boy wants flowers for his true love. These two high school seniors want to have sex at noon. A TV sports reporter gets the assignment to find romance in LA. And a quarterback contemplates his future. Two strangers meet on a plane. Some grandparents together for years face a crisis. And there's some I Hate Valentine's Day dinner, which is for the lonely and the lied to. But can Cupid finish the work by midnight? Pretty much, like. So yeah, it's my reaction. A Valentine's Day movie to review. This is the one I should review. As for my thoughts, the reason why I can see this film was ripped by critics and how I feel about the movie is that it feels just very messy and convoluted, and it feels more about trying to cast as many popular people as possible. And you know something, this was around 2004, 2003, Love Actually released, and it was successful with critics, and successful at the box office. But here's the thing, Love Actually, you know I don't like that movie. I also find that film way too boring, way too overhyped. And this basically just reminded me of that movie. It was just trying to be that movie, except set on Valentine's Day and a lot more convoluted. The difference is Love Actually has a slightly less overpopular actors and not as many subplots to try to juggle in one. This film feels like it's trying to cast whoever was popular around the time this came out and just try to jumble that all into one movie. And it doesn't know who it wants to even be about. There's even some subplots that don't belong, or should have been in a different movie, or some that just should have not been in the movie at all. There are some subplots that work, but there's others that feel just so unnecessary. It's when the late Gary Marshall got inspired by Love Actually and decided to cash in on the success 3 times. First this movie, and then the year after he did New Year's Eve, which was worse received, and then he did a Mother's Day film, which was unfortunately the last film he did before his death. And it just never worked at all. None of them worked. Like, after the film was officially shot and completed, like, this has an all-stacked cast. You got Jessica Alba, who barely is in the movie for like 3 scenes, and then once she leaves Ashton Kutcher, she's like barely ever seen again. Kathy Bates for like a few scenes. Jessica Biel, Bradley Cooper, Eric Dane, Patrick Dempsey, Hector Lozano, Jamie Foxx, Jen Garner, Topher Grace, Hathaway, Ashton Kutcher, Queen Latifah, Taylor Lautner, George Lopez, Sean McLean, Emma Roberts, and her aunt Julia Roberts. And of course, Taylor Swift, who you know I am not a fan of. One of the most overhyped artists in history, and sorry for those who are fans of her on here, if that's gonna piss them off. Or some of her cult fans see this review and are gonna get all mad at me for saying that. Who worship her as some music god. But I'm sorry, I'm not a fan of her music. Just sings about breakups in every single song. All the time. Basically it's different love stories that occur on Valentine's Day. There's not really much of a plot. After the film was shot and completed, it did make decent money because, well, it was released around Valentine's Day, but it got negative reviews. Alright, so here are the bad qualities in the story of Valentine's Day 2010. It's cluttered, it's a sloppy romantic comedy that maybe could have benefited from eliminating some stories. And that's the thing. The stuff that does work, I would say Julia Roberts and Bradley Cooper subplot I like. I feel that subplot worked well when they're on the plane flying back home. That's the subplot I did like. And I kind of wish that was the main focus of the film more. Kind of more than Kutcher's subplots. With Garner, while that wasn't a bad subplot either, I feel Julia and Bradley's were much more better done. Emma Roberts, I guess, wasn't bad. But their performances are pretty charismatic, and they do what they can to flesh out their characters. When it comes to Hathaway and Topher Grace's subplots, I feel that's a subplot I feel should have been just its own movie. I feel that should have just been a separate movie from this, and didn't need to be crammed in here. McLean Elizondo, they get wasted in this other story. Several other performers like Queen Latifah, Kathy Bates, they're just there. Their characters feel that their actresses are just there for a paycheck. And most others range from vapid or adequate. And I would say probably the worst subplot was Lautner and Swift's subplots, because they're just there to try to be the comic relief, and their characters just weren't funny. Their subplot was annoying at times, and their comedy just did not land as being this goofball couple who either kind of debate over a teddy bear or a shirt or a news report of their workouts. That's all they do. They don't have much connection to the plot, any of the plots at all whatsoever. The late director Gary Marshall does bring some interesting stories of love stories in Los Angeles on Valentine's Day, but they're just sugar-coated, superficial stories. Like there's a few that could work if there's a few you could just stick with and keep those just one and not try to cram in a bunch of other stuff. But there's a bunch of other stuff that feels has no connection. It's just there to give the actors something to do. And of course, like the ups and downs, the expectations and disappointments of Valentine's Day, that rings so true to a lot of us, and sometimes we're able to relate to a bit of it. And they almost go to try to make the movie good. Like, even the disheartening parts. Here's the thing. A couple of 50 years of marriage, couples and friends in the prime of life, different stage of relationships, employer-employee interactions, or high school dramas, or the love of parents and grandparents or childhood emotions. it could see it trying to show love or relationships from parts of life. You know, there was potential to explore something like that, and I feel the movie could have worked like better like that. So how do we start off? So we first start off with Kutcher's subplot, which now it wasn't bad. Now, okay, Kutcher's subplot wasn't bad because, you know, at least Kutcher's subplot has a bit of a connection to some of the more mainer story. You know, it has a bit of a connection to the subplots I liked, so I guess that subplot can stay. Where he's a florist and he's proposing to Jessica Alba, who's in like 3 scenes, and then after the breakup bit, she is barely ever seen again. So really, so I didn't really see a point in casting this actress if she's just gonna be 3 scenes and it's just gonna disappear, really like that. But proposes to her and she accepts, and of course, though, at first it seems like a bit of a good day for him. But then eventually, though, one of his closest friends, played by George Lopez, and Jen Garner's character, who's a school teacher that's also a friend of his, ends up later, don't end up being surprised because Morley ends up changing her mind and then just suddenly leaves him when he goes back to collect some stuff. After Kutcher's character finds out a bit about Patrick Dempsey's character, I'll get to in a bit. And of course, then we also get to the subplot I did like, where we see Julie Roberts' character, who's in the U.S. Army, and befriends Bradley Cooper's character on the flight back. Like, it's just gonna take like the whole entire day to get back home. And at first, like, she's going back home for a brief time. And of course, like, at first it seems like she's flying home to a boyfriend of hers. We don't know about this person she's flying home to just yet, but there are scenes I liked. You know, I did like her and Cooper's chemistry on the plane. And, you know, I kind of wish the film was more about them. You know, I feel they were the best parts of the film. Like, I don't, like, while Kutcher's subplot wasn't bad, I kind of wish the main plot kind of focused a little bit more on them. Because I feel their subplot was the part I liked. I thought that plot was the most well written. It kind of felt Valentine's Day-ish like. And there's a nice twist, and there's a pretty emotional twist with Julie Roberts' character at the end of the film that actually does make it pay off together. And, you know, now I'm not saying, there's a reveal with Cooper's character. You know, I'm not saying that there should have been romance between them, because there is a bit with Cooper's character at the end that you find out about his character or why he's going back home. I'm just saying, like, maybe, you know, if it ended with this, you know, just them being friends, you know, maybe just like that, you know, maybe still keeping in touch someday, then I would have liked the ending of that subplot. You know, that wouldn't have been nice, because to be fair, like, he also does help her get back home and lets her take his limousine to get back home, because he sees she's in a hurry once they land, and because there's going to be no taxis available. So I liked their subplot together. I thought the film would have been better had it just been more focused on them. So then we get to, well, Garner's subplot that has a connection to Kutcher's subplot, because, you know, those two subplots do have a connection to the airplane subplot. You'll find out later. So, Garner's character works at an elementary school and has fallen in love with Patrick Dempsey's character. And I will admit, I do kind of like Patrick Dempsey as an actor. I actually think he's a pretty talented actor. I liked him in Thanksgiving. And, you know, but at the same time, this part of the movie just did not really feel much like an impact, you know? Because this character's just there to kind of really be just an attempted really cheer villain that they kind of tried to shoehorn in to kind of make Kutcher's subplot kind of work. It just felt like that. And she's in love with Patrick Dempsey's character, who's a doctor or a surgeon at a hospital. But it turns out he's just having an affair behind his wife's back, and he's married. And he's going to go to San Francisco for a business trip, but he's actually not really going to San Francisco. He's actually going back home to his actual wife's house. And he stops at Kutcher's flower shop and orders 2 buckwheats. And Kutcher then, who has found out about her engagement to this guy, realizes that he's actually married and is actually having an affair. And he kind of wants to try to warn Garner about the truth throughout the film. But some of his warnings don't really get through. Like, this is kind of how our first bits are kind of going, and they're just kind of all over the place. You know, it kind of doesn't know what it wants to really be about. Like, there wasn't really much funny about this movie. So it didn't really feel like a comedy, really. It kind of just falls as a straight-up romance because there's way too many stories at the same time. And we're not really able to get involved with the majority of the rest of the characters. And especially even the ones that were the most interesting. Like the thing is, why I like Cooper and Roberts' subplot, they're barely in the movie that much. Most of the movie, it kind of feels it's focused more on Kutcher and Garner's characters a lot of the time. And I mean, some of the other stars still get their moments, but a majority of them either don't get much screen time, or just there to try to get their fans into the theaters. So the majority of the cast feels wasted because nobody gets more than a few minutes of screen time out of their roles, and it feels predictable, and a few surprises pass by in a matter of seconds. Like, what I've said before, this should have had less storylines, you know? Maybe just keep Kutcher and Garner's storyline, keep Cooper and Roberts' storyline, and, you know, it's more simpler that way. And, you know, because the kid in the film is part of the Kutcher and Garner subplots. I guess keep the kid's subplot as well, because I didn't mind the kid's subplot either. I'll get to the kid character later. And, well, I guess you gotta keep Emma Roberts' character, because Emma Roberts' character is kind of part of the kid's subplots. So, I guess keep that subplot. Just keep those. Simple as that. Keep those. Like, just keep those in there. And make it work a little better. Like, so that's why I said it should have less storylines. Just maybe those storylines would have been fine enough. Now, I'm not saying most majority of the characters are terrible. They're not terrible characters. Some of these characters have some decent moments, but they just have zero depth. Like, they could have gone to detail more, but it just lacks. And you're just sitting there, and I was just sitting there watching, like, you're wondering, how are these resolved? Like, there's not much of a resolvement with some of these subplots, really. Some of them just go nowhere. It's the romantic genre, usually a couple ends up together, and it's a journey you watch. But some of them do end up together, but that's the thing. And, of course, eventually after Garner's shift ends, she decides to go on a flight to San Francisco because she thinks Patrick Dempsey's going there and wants to surprise him, but Kutcher's still trying to warn that he's married, and he tries to warn her, but at first she doesn't believe him, and so he just leaves dejected. But then gets last minute, does not go to San Francisco, and goes to the hospital he works at. And then, of course, a staff member says, he's not going to San Francisco, he's married. You never knew that the whole time? And so then Garner realized Kutcher was right, but then she finds out he's at this local restaurant with his wife on a date. And so she disguises herself as a waitress and makes this scene at the restaurant. And during this scene at the restaurant, Ron Howard's father makes a guest appearance as one of the guests. So it was definitely interesting to know that it was actually Ron Howard's dad as one of the guests that's witnessing the whole scene. And when she pretty much lies about this dish called the lion stinking pig, which is pretty much what she's calling Dempsey's character and exposing his affair. And then she gives the toy that he gave her to the table, and the guest appearance of Ron Howard's dad is like, did we get a toy? And of course then his wife is a little suspicious, and the reason why Garner's character is able to do this is because the host of the restaurant has a son who's a part of her class, so he's fine with her doing this, and she pretty much gets this food and charges it on Dempsey's character's tab, which even the head waiter's fine with, and because he probably found out the whole story right there, and even And even he pretty much gives Dempsey's character the stare when she leaves, like, that's what you fucking deserve. And pretty much gives him that kind of stare right there. Then, of course, now I'm getting to the kid subplot, where in the film, there is this kid in the film that's actually one of Garner's character's students, who is trying to order flowers from Reed to be sent to a Valentine of his. And in this bit, like, there's a bit where this babysitter of his that's played by Emma Roberts, Julie Roberts' niece, is also, like, wants to lose her virginity to her boyfriend. And one bit, the boyfriend decides to basically break in her house randomly and decides to strip nude and rehearse a song he wrote before they have their sex. But then her mom catches this and he flees the house nude. So it's a weird way to rehearse, is to basically, you know, if I had a lover who probably broke into my house nude and stripped nude to rehearse, I'd be a little embarrassed. So that's kind of a weird thing to do. Just break into your girlfriend's house randomly, and isn't that illegal? You know, or maybe they have some kind of key, but just seriously. Like, seriously though, yeah, they are actually technically trying to meet at noon at that bit, so, but still, isn't that illegal to break into someone's house, though? And that's the thing, won't she have to kind of deal with her mom later? Like, her mom's just there for that scene, and then she's never seen or heard from ever again, so they don't really touch up on that ever again. But that's part though. But eventually though, after, like, when Garner's character arrives at this Valentine's party that Biel's character is hosting, who also doesn't really contribute much to the film either, the flowers that the kid ordered were actually for her. But Garner's character tells the kid to give the flowers to a real Valentine that he actually has a crush on, and it's this other girl named Ronnie, who is the daughter of the owner of that restaurant that they're at. And so he gives them to her. And throughout the film, like, he kind of does have a bit of a crush on her in that bit. And, you know, the kid's subplot was not bad. The kid was not annoying. The kid was actually tolerable. So I did actually like the kid's subplot. And there's a little twist involving two of the characters in that bit. So yeah, keep the kid's subplots. And right there, and there's not much seen of him and the babysitter that much, but those weren't bad subplots. Like, main reason is that this film too often just drops to immature levels to make filler scenes. There never really gets much of that. And there's this little of a backing story to write out all these different characters. It's like these. That's the thing. There's times it borrows elements from Love Actually. Like, the cheating husband, yeah, that was in Love Actually with Alan Rickman's character, the late Alan Rickman's character. This kid falling in love, that was Liam Neeson's character's son. This public figure's relationship life. A man breaking the airport to say a thing to his girlfriend. Like, these are scenes in Love Actually. Like, you can tell they were trying to cash in on Love Actually, because Love Actually was such a hit with critics and a hit at the box office. Thing, like, and the subplots that just did not fit were beyond the Jamie Foxx's subplot, which, now don't get me wrong, I like Jamie Foxx as an actor, but their subplot didn't really feel much fit in at all. The only time Biel's character really fits in the plot is the I Hate Valentine's Day party bits. That's really it. Right there, like, their parts were just kind of boring. And it's just trying to juggle all these different stories in a short time, but there's no room for character development. The actors don't have enough screen time to build their characters, or work much chemistry between them, or some of them don't feel connected to much of the plot, and it feels like the movie's like a bit too long too. This is like 2 hours long for a romantic comedy, and you're left expecting much more from this all-star cast. So, now we also have this other plot with the kid's grandparents who are watching while his mom is away, who are facing troubles of a marriage, and eventually the grandmother confesses to the grandfather about this affair with one of the grandfather's business partners, and the grandfather's upset by this and kind of storms out. So their subplot was okay. That's that, and as Grace's high school friends are pretty much experiencing this freshness of love and agree to kind of wait to have sex, and that's the thing. Lautner and Swift's subplot was probably the worst of all of them. There was no point to their characters. Their comedy was not funny. And then after the whole news interview of their gym workout routine, they were pretty much just barely ever really seen or heard from ever again until the final acts. So, what was the point of their subplot? Their subplot didn't really go much anywhere. They just kind of disappear. They kind of just disappear for a long time because it's like they didn't know what to do with their plots, and their characters were just really annoying. There, and also this other subplot with this football player that's gay is contemplating the end of his career with his publicist and his agents. And this publicist, that's BL's character, is organizing a Valentine's Day party that also didn't have really anything to do with the plot either, but then becomes interested in a sports reporter who is ordered to do a Valentine's Day report by his boss, but shares BL's character's hatred of the holiday. Valentine's Day is just one of those films where the studio had faith in the project, but they clearly were invested in nothing really in it outside of value. All we got was just all-star cast and a 5-cent screenplay and feeling like a soap opera, and it's not romantic. There's times it could be funny, but it's not on a consistent basis. Most of the acting does feel plastic at times. The whole film just has nowhere to go. It's a film that just tries to force in the 24 hours of Valentine's Day with some fine stories, but some that are just uninteresting, and just a waste of talent all these actors. Right there. So, because some of their scenes have little excitement, or just contribute really nothing. It's just obsessed with stardom to try to lure the fans of these actors to the theaters, trying to be Love Actually, a film I'm also not a fan of. If they tried to actually take their time, actually, I don't know, keep less plots, Valentine's Day maybe could have worked, but no one else really gets a chance to shine. No thought process. And especially with some that are just unpleasant to watch. Now, Hathaway and Grace's could have worked if it was just a separate movie on its own, not try to shoehorn it into this. Lautner and Swift's plot should have not been in the film at all. They were probably the worst part of the film. Right there. And the sons that do work get kind of constantly cut away because they're trying to get in all the other actors time to shine, and they're just feeling wasted. So now we get on with the finale, or the gazillion finales of all these characters. There's Hathaway and Grace's subplot where Hathaway's character is basically dating Topher Grace's character, and she works as a phone sex operator, and he's shocked by this, and Grace's character is a bit of an asshole when he finds out. Especially after Hathaway's character explains that she has to pay off a student loan. And he acts like a bit of a douchebag. But then of course, when he goes to this little outdoor movie night at a grave. And that's another thing. Why are you hosting an outdoor Valentine's Day movie at a graveyard? Or at a cemetery? Why, of all the places they pick a fucking cemetery for an outdoor movie where there's a bunch of dead people lying? Instead of a park, they pick a fucking cemetery. Why? Who the hell would go watch an outdoor movie at a fucking cemetery where people are trying to rest in peace? It makes no sense. But of course, once he's there, he eventually sees the grandparents forgive each other, and he goes back and reconciles with her, despite the fact that he acted like an asshole when he found out why she was working as a phone sex operator in the first place. Though it makes kind of no sense. their forgiveness scene feels half-assed. And the football player then comes out as gay on national television. And then and we find out his lover is Cooper's character, and they go back together. And then, of course, the twist I liked with Julia Roberts' character, because throughout the film we find out he thinks she's going home to a boyfriend, but it turns out the kid from earlier is actually her son. And this was a nice heartwarming moment when they reunite and they embrace each other, and the grandparents are watching. I liked that shot. I thought that was very well acted. That was the most well acted part of the film. Like, that's one of the things I liked about Roberts' subplot. They kind of keep who she's returning to secret, and then you find out the kid from earlier was actually who she was going home to. That was actually her son, and her parents were actually watching them. And then Willie drops Felicia off at home, and they pretty much, that's their subplots that should not have been there is done. Fox and Biel's characters hang out the news station, and then they get engaged. Alfonso and his wife dying. Roberts' character and her boyfriend agree to wait to have sex, which is for the better, considering that she'll probably have to go home and deal with her mom from earlier. So, despite the fact that we don't even really see her for the rest of the film, so what's the point of that whole scene of him rehearsing naked? The grandparents reconcile, and they redo their marriage vows. Patrick Dempsey got dumped, obviously, because his wife found out he cheated on her, so he's now divorced and single, likely for the rest of his life. And, of course, Morley tries, and of course, Alba's character, who just disappeared for most of the film, is trying to reconnect with Kutcher's character again, but instead starts a relationship with Garner's character. And Paula receives a call from one of Liz's clients and takes delight in expressing her dominance and sadism. The end. Really. And then it begins with an announcement that tomorrow's going to be another day, but the movie's over. All these subplots, all these finales. I would usually I say that's how the movie ends if it was just a single plot, but it's how these jumbled plots of the movie end. That's it. There are too many plots, so it's hard to really call us a finale. So I call us a gazillion finales. A gazillion of them. Now, do I have any good qualities with Valentine's Day? Yeah, I do. It prevents it from being an overly terrible movie. Roberts and Cooper's characters, they have the best subplot, and the sad thing is they barely get much screen time as much as Kutcher and Garner's characters did. I feel their subplot was the best, where they're on this plane together, and their chemistry was great together. Yeah, it's not trying to be forced romance chemistry, but it's more friendship chemistry about how they feel Valentine's Day, who they're returning home to. And I kind of would like better, maybe they do become friends in the end, No, not in love. I'm just friends, That would have made the subplots ending even better, Because I did like their scenes. Their scenes were the best. Their scenes, I feel, were the best parts. The kid was actually not annoying. The kid was actually decent. And his subplot wasn't bad. I did like his subplots and also the bit of the restaurant with him and Garner was also nice acting moments. Like, here's the thing. Maybe could have made the movie work. Maybe made the movie a little more simple. Maybe just take the subplots of the kid, take the subplot of Roberts and Cooper, take the subplot of Garner and Kutcher, take the grandparents' subplots, and maybe keep Emma Roberts' subplot because, well, that does kind of have a bit of a connection to those subplots. And just combine that with this movie. Then it's less jumbled, Not trying to do a gazillion things at once. And because they feel the least jumbled. And the ending bit where Roberts goes home to her son and they reunite was a heartwarming moment. That brought a smile to my face. But other than those, Valentine's Day to me is just a convoluted mess that's just trying to cash in on Love Actually, except be a Valentine's Day themed movie instead. Except a lot more convoluted with too many actors than Love Actually did have. So in the end, Valentine's Day 2010 is a movie to avoid on Valentine's Day. There's other Valentine's Day themed movies you can just watch instead that are much more simpler. Anyways, that's it for my review of Valentine's Day. If you want to rate Valentine's Day, here's how I'm going to rate this movie. So overall, if you want a more simpler, good, romantic-themed Valentine's Day movie, you're not going to really get that with this movie, so I would probably just avoid it. And if we're going to rate Valentine's Day, I'm going to give Valentine's Day 2010 a 5 out of 10. Alright, there we go, guys. So, now the reason why I gave this a 5 out of 10 is because it's not an overly terrible movie. It's not one of the worst things to come out, because it has stuff that works. That's the thing. It has stuff that actually had potential to actually make a pretty solid movie. And, well, there's some not bad acting from some of the actors. So I can't call this necessarily a terrible movie. And honestly, I don't find it nearly and honestly, I kind of find it slightly better than Love Actually. But now, I'm sorry this was a little late despite being a Valentine's Day review, but FANEXPO was that day. If FANEXPO wasn't this weekend, you know, maybe I definitely would have done this earlier. Now I want to know in the comments down below how Valentine's Day went for you guys, and if you've seen this movie, what are your thoughts on it? And until then, that will be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.